17th, went to Plantation House. The governor, after having made some inquiries about the state of Napoleon's health and that of General Gourgaud, and whether I had complied with the desire he had expressed in the 21st that I should show to Captain Blakeney the letter in which Lord Liverpool's name was mentioned, I replied that as he had left it to my option whether to show it or not, I had preferred the latter, seeing that the business had occurred a long time ago. That at the time I had offered to show it, which he had refused to accept, and also because he had said he considered the offer to show it as an insult, that it was necessary for me to be very cautious. And as I did not know why I was now required to show the letter, I had declined doing so. His Excellency was not pleased with this reply and began to abuse me in his customary manner, saying that I constantly insulted him as governor. I replied that it never had been my intention to insult him either in word or deed, and I was very sorry if constructions so foreign from my intentions should have been put upon them. Sir Hudson Lowe then got up and, looking at me in a menacing manner, said, "Upon your word of honor, sir, I ask you if you have had any other conversation with Napoleon Bonaparte than upon medical subjects for a month past?" I replied, "Perhaps there may have been on other subjects not interesting." "I do not allow you, sir, to be a judge of whether they were uninteresting or otherwise. You have no authority for holding any communications with Napoleon Bonaparte unless upon medical subjects, and then only when sent to for that purpose. Have you had any communication with any other person of his family?" "Certainly, sir, I have." Without waiting to know whether those communications were medical or otherwise, he burst out with, "You have no authority, sir, to hold any communication whatsoever with any of his family who are subject to the same restrictions as himself, unless upon medical subjects, and then only when sent for. And when finished, you are to leave them. You have no business to go amongst them, unless for medical purposes. Have you, sir, had any communication with any of them, unless upon those subjects?" I replied by referring His Excellency to his own orders that I should not hold any other communication than medical with them. "This reply, sir, as usual, is not a direct one. You make it a practice to go to town when ships arrive, which I do not approve of. You go to collect news for General Bonaparte." I answered that I was an English officer, and as such would not give up my rights. Moreover, that I, as well as others, was desirous of purchasing the necessaries of life as soon as they were landed, and before any monopoly took place to increase the price. That if he intended to prohibit me from going to town, I had to request orders to that effect in writing. This Sir Hudson refused, saying with a sneer, "The request is worthy of the place you come from and the people with whom you associate. I do not think a person under a pledge to Napoleon Bonaparte ought to be received into company, and I do not approve of your going to town when ships arrive. You are suspected by me, sir." I replied that I was under no pledge to Napoleon, that one which was tacitly understood in every society of gentlemen. The governor said that it was presumption and insolence for me to dare to judge of the line of conduct His Majesty's government had thought proper to pursue with respect to Napoleon Bonaparte. I replied that I did not attempt to judge of that I merely mentioned what was the custom of society. "You are a suspected man, sir. You are suspected by me." "I cannot help that, sir. It is a consolation to me, however, under such circumstances, to have mens conscia recti, a clear conscience." This, the governor said, was a fresh insult, which he followed up by a volley of abuse. "You took an opportunity, sir, staying in town the other day when a ship arrived, instead of coming here to report, as you ought to have done," said His Excellency, after he had a little recovered his breath. "It was in compliance with your own instructions, sir, on the 30th of January. You then told me, in the presence of Major Gorker, that when I saw Mr. Baxter or Sir Thomas Reed in town, it might supersede the necessity of my coming to Plantation House on that day. Having therefore seen and explained to Mr. Baxter on that day what I had to say, I did not think it necessary to come up here. He endeavored to shuffle this off. I appealed to Major Gorker. If I had not repeated His Excellency's own words, the governor said, in not the most moderate manner, that this appeal was an insult to him, and burst forth into fresh paroxysm of invective, which lasted for a considerable time. 18th. Napoleon, more lively than he has been for a few days, had some further conversation with him upon the subject of the death of Princess Charlotte, during which he observed that had she been the wife of a poor mechanic, she would have been saved, and that one of les dames de la Halle de Paris would have met with more care and attention from her relations and friends than the heiress to the greatest throne in Europe had experienced from hers. He afterwards spoke of the plans which he had upon England. Had I succeeded in effecting a landing, said he, I have very little doubt that I should have accomplished my views. 3,000 boats, each to carry 20 men and 1 horse with a proportion of artillery were ready. Your fleet, having been decoyed away, as I before explained to you, would have left me master of the channel. Without this, I would not have made the attempt. 4 days would have brought me to London. In a country like England, abounding in plains, defense is very difficult. I have no doubt that your troops would have done their duty, but one battle lost, the capital would have been in my power. You could not have collected a force sufficiently strong to beat me in a pitched battle. Your ideas of burning and destroying towns and the capital itself are very plausible in arguments, but impracticable in their accomplishment. You would have fought a battle and lost it. Well, then, you would say, we have been beaten, but we have not lost our honor. We shall now endeavor to tirer la meilleure partie from our misfortune. We must make terms. I would have offered you a constitution of your own choice and have said, assemble in London deputies from the people to fix upon a constitution. I would have called upon Burdett and other popular leaders to organize one according to the wishes of the people. I would have declared the blank fallen from the blank, abolished the nobility, proclaimed liberty, freedom, and equality. Think you that in order to keep the house blank on the blank, your rich citizens, merchants, and others in London would have consented to sacrifice their riches, their houses, their families, and all their dearest interests, especially when I had made them comprehend that I only came to blank away and to give them liberty? No, it is contrary to history and to human nature. You are too rich. Your principal people have too much to lose by resistance, and your canaille too much to gain by a change. If indeed they supposed that I wanted to render England a province of France, then indeed l'esprit national would do wonders. But I would have formed a republic according to your own wishes, required a moderate contribution, barely sufficient to have paid the troops, and perhaps not even that. Your canaille would have been, for me, knowing que je suis l'homme de peuple et que je sors de la canaille moi-même, because I'm a man of the people and I come from the mob myself. And that whenever a man had merit or talent, I elevated him without asking how many degrees of nobility he had, knowing that by joining me they would be relieved from the yoke of the aristocracy under which they labor. There is not a canaille in the world, not even the Prussian, worse treated, accepting the obligation of serving as soldiers. The German canaille are better off than yours. You have no more regard for yours than if they were so many helots, and you treat them precisely as if they were such. To my lords and my ladies, to the aristocracy, the gentlemen, in English. Oh, indeed, you pay every kind of attention and regard. Nothing can be too good for them. No treatment kind enough. But for your canaille, bah, they are so many dogs, as your contractor said when furnishing provisions to the French prisoners. It is too good for those French dogs. You yourselves have got a great deal of la morgue aristocratique in your head and appear to look down upon your canaille as if they were a race of inferior beings. You talk of your freedom. Can anything be more horrible than your pressing of seamen? You send your boats on shore to seize upon every male that can be found, who, if they have the misfortune misfortune to belong to the canaille, if they cannot prove themselves gentlemen, are hurried on board of your ships to serve as seamen in all quarters of the globe. And yet, you have the impudence to talk of the conscription in France. It wounds your pride because it fell upon all ranks. Oh, how shocking that a gentleman's son, in English, should be obliged to defend his country, just as if he were one of the canaille, and that he should be compelled to expose his body or put himself on a level with vile plebeian. Yet God made all men alike, who forms the nation, not your lords, not your fat prelates, and churchmen, nor your gentlemen, nor your oligarchy. Oh, one day the people will revenge themselves and terrible scenes will take place. That conscription, continued Napoleon, which offended your morgue aristocratique so much, was conducted scrupulously according to the principles of equal rights. Every native of a country is bound to defend it. Conscription did not écrase a particular class like your press gang nor the canaille because they were poor. It was the most just because the most equal mode of raising troops. It rendered the French army the best composed in the world. The conscription would have become a national institution instead of being regarded as a punishment or a servitude. It would have been a point of honor to have served the country, and the time would have come that a girl would not have married a youth that had not paid the debt he owed to it. The love of glory is the inheritance of the Frenchman. Were you a nation, continued he, of half savages, of poor wild mountaineers, or of ferocious shepherds like the Scythians, then indeed you might destroy your capital and desolate your country in order to stop the progress of an invader, even if you were as poor, as wild, and as ignorant as the Spaniards. Perhaps you might destroy some of your own towns and habitations, but you are too rich and too selfish. Where is there one of you who would say, I will destroy my house, abandon my property to be pillaged, my wife and daughters to be violated, my sons to be massacred, and for what? To keep blank on the blank and Lord Bathurst and the Archbishop of Canterbury in their employments at $20,000 a year? All this I will do against a man who offers terms, who proposes to give us a constitution according to the wish of the nation. No. It is more than could be expected from man. Pitt himself was well aware of it, and one of the means which he took to form the coalition against me was by asserting that a descent was possible, that if it were effected, England would be conquered before 12 months, that then all the continent would be at my mercy, at my disposal, that England once fallen, all was lost. This was the King of Prussia. This is what he told me afterwards. Napoleon now repeated what he had said once before relative to the inhabitants of Moscow not having assisted in setting fire to the city, but on the contrary, having done their utmost to extinguish it, and proceeded thus. The English, after a battle, finding that we did not come to plunder and destroy them, that we did not injure or molest the inhabitants, that their wives and daughters remained unviolated, for I would not have allowed the smallest outrage to be committed. Instant death would have been inflicted on whoever attempted it. They would have seen that we did not come to rob or to destroy them, but merely to blank. If indeed war were waged, as in ancient times, when the male prisoners were massacred or made slaves of, and the women became the concubines of the victors, then the conquest of the nation would have been impossible. But no! You would have seen us advancing and molesting the population as little as your own soldiers. Everything would have been done to conciliate and to harmonize. I now made some observations to Napoleon about his own government in France. The system of government, said he, must be adapted to l'esprit de la nation and to circumstances. In the first place, France required a strong government. While I was at the head of it, I may say that France was in the same state as Rome when a dictator was declared necessary for the salvation of the Republic. Successions of coalitions against her existence were formed by your gold amongst all the powerful nations in Europe. To resist successively, it was necessary that all the energies of the country should be at the disposal of the chief. I never conquered unless in my own defense. Europe never ceased to make war upon France and her principles. Il nous fallut abattre sous peine d'être abattu. We had to fight or get beaten. Between the parties that agitated France for a long time, I was like a rider seated on an unruly horse who always wanted to swerve either to the right or to the left, and to make him keep a straight course, I was obliged to let him feel the bridle. Occasionally, the government of a country just emerged from a revolution menaced by foreign enemies and agitated by the intrigues of domestic traitors must necessarily be tough. In quieter times, my dictature would have finished, and I should have commenced my constitutional reign, even as it was, with the coalition always existing against me, either secret or public, openly avowed or denied. There was more equality in France than in any other country in Europe. One of my grand objects was to render education accessible to everybody. I caused every institution to be formed upon a plan which offered instruction to the public, either gratis or at a rate so moderate as not to be beyond the means of the peasant. The museums were thrown open to the canaille. My canaille would have become the best educated in the world. All my exertions were directed to illuminate the mass of the nation instead of brutifying them by ignorance and superstition. Those English, added he, who are lovers of liberty will one day lament with tears, having gained the battle of Waterloo. It was as fatal to the liberties of Europe in its effects as that of Philippi was to those of Rome, and like it has precipitated Europe into the hands of a triumvir associated together for the oppression of mankind, the suppression of knowledge, and the restoration of superstition.